The screen flickered to life, a storm of lights and cameras capturing the moment in electric detail. Alex Jones' face was a tempest, veins pulsing like cords of live electricity under his skin. His voice shattered the air, a mixture of fury, desperation, and spectacle, each word aimed to dominate the room, to assert control over a narrative built on fear. Every syllable felt amplified, a challenge thrown at the world itself, daring anyone to confront the chaos he had so meticulously constructed. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett sat composed, her gaze unwavering. There was a stillness to her, an almost magnetic calm that cut through the frenzied storm of Jones' theatrics. She held no microphone, no flashy graphics, just a quiet authority that demanded attention. And then she spoke, softly, deliberately, each word measured, precise, and loaded with truth. As the camera captured her, viewers across the country could feel it. This was the moment the unsteady house of lies would begin to crack. Jones lunged forward, pointing, shouting, accusing, trying to wrestle back the narrative with the raw force of intimidation. But Crockett's calm never faltered. Her voice rose only slightly, measured, and with every sentence, a new layer of exposure peeled back. Each claim she made landed like a hammer on a fragile wall, revealing inconsistencies, contradictions, and deception that had long been masked by Jones' bluster. The audience, glued to their screens, felt the tension in the air, hearts pounding as truth and spectacle collided in a live, unrelenting storm. Viewers leaned in, disbelief shadowing their faces as the showdown unfolded. Social media notifications began exploding in real time, tweets, live reactions, hashtags flooding timelines as the nation collectively held its breath. The dichotomy was stark: chaos versus calm, rage versus reason, illusion versus accountability. Every second amplified the suspense, the stakes invisible yet thunderous, echoing far beyond the walls of the studio. And just when it seemed Jones might regain control, a deliberate pause from Crockett, a piercing look, a single undeniable fact dropped into the room, and the world seemed to stop. The balance of power shifted in a heartbeat, leaving everyone watching suspended, hearts racing, minds straining to process what had just happened. But what happened next left viewers around the nation gasping. The broadcast wasn't just another segment on a late-night news cycle, it was a collision of truth and deception that millions had been unknowingly waiting for. Across the nation, households, dorm rooms, and offices were illuminated by flickering screens, all eyes fixed on a live confrontation that promised more than drama, it promised accountability. This wasn't theater for theater's sake. It was a reckoning. Every word spoken, every claim challenged, had consequences that rippled far beyond the studio. Policies, public perception, even lives hung in the balance, and everyone watching felt the gravity. Alex Jones had built a reputation on spectacle, a kingdom of fear and outrage fueled by conspiracy and chaos. Yet, for the first time in years, that empire faced a threat it couldn't simply shout down. Jasmine Crockett's methodical dismantling of falsehoods wasn't just a performance. It was a mirror held up to an entire audience, showing the dissonance between what was broadcast and what was true. Her calm composure acted like a lens, bringing the distortions into sharp focus, leaving no place to hide. Millions of viewers were seeing, in real time, the unraveling of an authority long thought untouchable. The stakes could not have been higher. This wasn't a debate about opinions or ideology, this was a battle over facts, over credibility, over the public's right to know. Every exaggeration Jones had ever broadcast, every misleading claim, every carefully engineered narrative was now vulnerable. For viewers who had relied on him for guidance, confusion and betrayal tangled in their minds. For those who sought clarity, a surge of vindication pulsed through their consciousness. And in that tension, the drama of the moment reached a fever pitch. Everyone watching knew this wasn't going to end quietly. Every gesture, every pause, every tightening of Jones' jaw foreshadowed escalation. Social media chatter intensified as hashtags began trending before the debate even concluded. Viewers shared clips, screenshots, and commentary, their reactions forming a living, breathing pulse of collective awareness. The nation had become part of the narrative itself, the debate was no longer contained by studio walls, it was an event shaping public perception, a pivotal point in a cultural and political moment charged with tension. And yet, the deeper implications were undeniable. This live confrontation was about more than one man's credibility, it was about the power of information, about the responsibility of those who wield it, and about the consequences when truth is deliberately obscured. The audience felt it viscerally, the potential for widespread misinformation to influence elections, public health, and trust in institutions was a shadow that stretched across every household tuned in. And as Jones' defenses began to falter under Crockett's unyielding precision, viewers realized that the fallout could be historic. The air crackled with anticipation, the nation holding its collective breath. Every eye was trained on the screen, every mind calculating the implications. Who would dominate the narrative? Who would emerge not just victorious, but vindicated in the eyes of the public? The tension was unbearable, almost tactile, as if the very walls of the broadcast studio contained the weight of millions of expectant gazes. And then, the cracks in the narrative began to show. Before the live confrontation, Alex Jones was more than a personality, he was a phenomenon, a force of chaos that had reshaped the way millions consumed news. Born in Dallas, Texas, he had clawed his way into the public eye with a mix of bravado and theatrical outrage. Early on, Jones discovered the power of fear as a tool, a whisper of conspiracy here, a hint of government betrayal there, all amplified by a voice that could turn paranoia into entertainment. He had a knack for performance, for turning the mundane into the apocalyptic, for making listeners feel as though the world was on the brink of collapse, and only he held the keys to survival. By the time his empire was fully established, Jones had become synonymous with shock journalism. His platform thrived on chaos, a constant stream of hyperbolic claims, explosive theories, and relentless attacks on anyone who dared challenge him. The louder he shouted, the more followers he amassed, and the more his authority seemed cemented. But behind the bluster was a dangerous truth, unchecked, his words carried the power to mislead, to manipulate public perception, to create divisions that went far beyond entertainment. Millions tuned in, believing they were gaining insight, while in reality, they were being swept along in a carefully constructed whirlwind of outrage. Jones' arrogance was legendary. Every appearance, every broadcast, was an assertion of dominance, a declaration that no one could match his audacity or his insight. He framed himself as a warrior against corruption, a lone truth-teller fighting a world of deceit, yet the evidence of his own distortions was never far behind. He attacked institutions, experts, and whistleblowers with a ferocity designed to intimidate, to overwhelm the facts themselves. The spectacle was intoxicating, even his critics couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about his confidence, even as it teetered on the edge of recklessness. His history of misinformation read like a catalogue of modern conspiracies. Sandy Hook, government cover-ups, corporate manipulation, Jones had championed them all, spinning narratives that were often demonstrably false, yet captivating enough to create entire communities of believers. Each false claim fortified his mythos, feeding the persona of a man untethered by the constraints of accountability. The chaos he cultivated wasn't incidental, it was deliberate, a carefully honed skill that made him simultaneously fascinating and infuriating. Cinematically, Jones embodied chaos itself. Every broadcast was an eruption, a storm of words and energy that seemed barely contained by the walls of his studio. He was a hurricane of emotion, a dangerous combination of intellect and impulse, wielded with performative skill that left viewers simultaneously enraged and enthralled. His presence demanded attention, yet it carried the underlying threat of distortion, the subtle erosion of rational discourse. For those who valued truth, he was a warning, for those who craved spectacle, he was a hero. The duality was unnerving, and it drew millions like moths to a flame. Yet, the more entrenched he became in his empire of chaos, the more vulnerable he also became. His arrogance blinded him to scrutiny, his bluster masked cracks that were steadily widening. Every overstatement, every deflection, every rhetorical flourish was a thread in a tapestry that could unravel under precise, unrelenting challenge. And that challenge was coming. Yet, little did he know, a force of calm intelligence was waiting to confront him. Jasmine Crockett's rise was quiet compared to the storm of her adversaries, but no less powerful. She did not build her reputation on spectacle or fear, she built it on precision, intellect, and an unwavering commitment to truth. From her earliest days, Crockett exhibited a clarity of purpose that set her apart. She understood that power was not measured by the volume of one's voice, but by the weight of one's convictions, the meticulousness of preparation, and the courage to confront falsehood wherever it arose. Her career was a testament to relentless dedication. As a lawyer, she took on cases that others avoided, fighting for marginalized communities, challenging systemic injustices, and advocating for policies that ensured accountability. Every brief she filed, every argument she delivered, carried the imprint of someone who had spent years studying, analyzing, and understanding the machinery of power. She was not a firebrand who shouted for attention, she was a strategist, a tactician who knew that knowledge, patience, and moral clarity could dismantle even the most formidable opponent. Yet, her path was not without sacrifice. Late nights poring over documents, the strain of high-stakes cases, and the constant scrutiny of those threatened by her advocacy tested her resolve. Friends and family often worried about the toll it took on her, the emotional and physical exhaustion of standing against entrenched power. But Crockett never wavered. She understood that standing up to misinformation and corruption required more than courage in the moment, it demanded preparation, endurance, and an unwavering moral compass. Every personal cost she endured was a testament to her commitment to truth. Crockett's advocacy extended beyond courtrooms and legal briefs. She was a voice for the voiceless, an exemplar of integrity in a world increasingly dominated by noise and spectacle. Whether challenging policies that threatened civil liberties or confronting public figures who distorted reality, she consistently positioned herself on the side of justice, armed not with theatrics, but with facts, logic, and moral authority. Her presence commanded respect, even from those predisposed to oppose her. Her strength was in her intellect and character, the quiet power of someone who refused to be intimidated by bluster or bravado. Every moment of her career had prepared her for confrontation. She studied rhetoric and deception, understood the patterns of misinformation, and anticipated the strategies used by those who relied on chaos to distract and dominate. Her preparation was meticulous, and she knew exactly how to disarm even the loudest liar. She could read a room, gauge a tone, and anticipate the instinctive moves of someone like Alex Jones, the theatrics, the interruptions, the emotional manipulation. She had honed the skills to remain composed while dismantling falsehoods with precision and authority. Cinematically, Crockett represented calm at the center of a storm. Where Jones was fire, she was ice tempered with steel. Where he relied on fear and volume, she relied on clarity, patience, and evidence. Where he sought to dominate, she sought to enlighten. Her presence on that live broadcast was more than a contest of personalities, it was a collision between two philosophies, chaos versus reason, spectacle versus substance, bluster versus integrity. Her story resonated with viewers long before the confrontation began. People saw themselves in her, immigrants seeking recognition, everyday citizens striving to hold institutions accountable, individuals who had been silenced or ignored. Her integrity and resilience inspired admiration and empathy, not just for her courage, but for the sacrifices she had made to ensure that truth had a voice in a world increasingly dominated by lies. Every argument she had ever prepared, every legal case she had won, and every injustice she had confronted had led her to this moment. The stage was set for a confrontation that no one would forget. The broadcast room seemed to vibrate with tension as the cameras rolled, capturing every twitch, every glance, every subtle movement. Alex Jones leaned forward, his voice rising into a torrent of accusations and interruptions. Words collided in the air, sharp and chaotic, bouncing off the studio walls as if the room itself were caught in the storm. He gestured wildly, pointing fingers, pounding the desk, trying to dominate the space with sheer force of volume. Each shout seemed designed to overwhelm, to intimidate, to drown out reason itself. But Jasmine Crockett remained unshaken. Her posture was composed, her gaze unwavering. She waited, allowing Jones to expend his energy, his fury, his theatrics. When she spoke, it was deliberate, precise, each word landing with the weight of undeniable fact. The camera cut between them, capturing the stark contrast: Jones, a whirlwind of emotion, veins bulging, red-faced and desperate; Crockett, a pillar of calm, articulate, unshakable. Every viewer could sense the imbalance, the chaos of arrogance meeting the precision of preparation. Audience murmurs filled the studio, subtle but unmistakable, as the tension became palpable. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, captivated, hearts racing, unwilling to look away. The camera captured every flicker of expression, every tightening jaw, every measured pause. Social media notifications erupted in real time, hashtags trending, comments flooding in, some mocking, some cheering, but all absorbed in the spectacle. The contrast was mesmerizing, a visual and emotional collision between two diametrically opposed forces. Jones attempted to regain control, deflecting with wild claims, shouting over Crockett, his logic twisted into a frenzy of accusation. He brought up every narrative he had built his career upon, trying to anchor the conversation in familiar chaos. But Crockett dismantled each point with calm precision, citing evidence, quoting facts, and exposing contradictions that left him visibly rattled. Every time he raised his voice, she lowered hers just slightly, each syllable sharp, calculated, a scalpel cutting through the noise. The tension escalated further as interruptions became more frequent. Jones' theatrics intensified, his frustration was tangible, almost unbearable to witness. His eyes darted, searching for any sign of weakness, any opening to reclaim dominance. But Crockett anticipated every move, her preparation evident in the way she parried, redirected, and reframed each attack. The room seemed to hold its breath, the very air charged with suspense, as viewers across the nation felt the drama unfold live. Cinematic angles captured it all, the sweat glistening on Jones' forehead, the slight furrow of Crockett's brow as she prepared her next point, the camera cutting to audience reactions, their eyes wide, their faces a mirror of collective anticipation. The debate had become more than an exchange of words, it was a psychological duel, a battle of composure versus chaos, intellect versus intimidation. And then, with one calm phrase, Crockett changed everything. The studio fell into a tense silence as Jasmine Crockett leaned slightly forward, her eyes locking on Alex Jones with unflinching clarity. For a moment, the chaos seemed to pause, the room holding its breath as if time itself had slowed. Jones, previously a hurricane of words and motion, suddenly appeared momentarily off balance, the first crack in his relentless facade. Every twitch, every nervous glance, betrayed a man who had been confident in his dominion, now confronted by precision and truth. Crockett began methodically, almost ceremoniously, peeling back layers of deception. Her voice was steady, calm, but each word carried the weight of evidence, undeniable and piercing. She recited documented claims, contradictions, and blatant falsehoods that Jones had propagated over the years, citing sources that could not be disputed. Each revelation landed like a blow, resonating with the audience and echoing through the airwaves. The contrast was stark, where Jones' theatrics once dominated, now silence followed truth, punctuated only by the murmurs of realization spreading through the crowd. The camera cut to slow-motion reactions, the subtle gasp of a production assistant, the widening eyes of journalists, the stiffening posture of analysts. Social media lit up in real time as viewers recognized the magnitude of what was unfolding. Clips circulated immediately, every pause, every carefully articulated point, every faltering claim from Jones magnified across platforms. Hashtags trending, memes forming, opinions polarizing, millions were witnessing what felt like the unraveling of a legend. Crockett's methodical approach transformed live television into an arena of accountability, her presence commanding attention without a single raised voice. Jones tried to interrupt, to deflect, to reassert dominance, but his interruptions now sounded frantic, hollow, desperate. Each attempt to twist or mislead was met with a precise counterpoint from Crockett. She exposed inconsistencies with calm authority, walking through the web of false claims and conspiracies as if threading a needle, each strand unraveling beneath her scrutiny. The villain's confidence wavered visibly, the facade of certainty, the mask of unassailable authority, began to crack. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his gestures lost their precision, his words faltered, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of the battlefield he had once controlled effortlessly. The audience felt the tension escalate with every passing second. Murmurs became whispers, whispers became a collective hush, punctuated by the rhythmic tapping of pens, the shuffling of notes, the quiet intake of breath. Crockett used these pauses to her advantage, allowing the weight of each revelation to settle, giving viewers a moment to absorb the gravity of her evidence. Every silence amplified the drama, a careful orchestration that highlighted both her composure and the unraveling of her opponent. Commentators online began narrating in near real time, adding context, emphasizing contradictions, highlighting evidence. The scene transformed into a multi-layered spectacle, live reactions on air, expert analysis, and the collective judgment of millions of viewers converging simultaneously. Slow-motion cuts showed subtle expressions, the flicker of disbelief on Joan's face, the tentative nods of understanding from the audience, the tension in the studio air that seemed to vibrate with every factual statement Crockett delivered. Music swelled softly in the background, emphasizing dramatic crescendos, rising in tandem with each new revelation, pulling viewers deeper into the narrative arc. Crockett's takedown was not merely verbal, it was almost surgical in execution. She traced patterns, highlighted repeated misinformation, and exposed the contradictions that had long been shielded by Joan's confident bluster. With each point, the villain's ability to dominate the discussion diminished. His interruptions grew more erratic, his composure fraying, until finally, he hesitated mid-sentence, a fleeting but unmistakable sign of vulnerability. Viewers at home instinctively recognized the shift, the balance of power had tilted decisively, and the spectacle of arrogance confronted by disciplined truth was irresistible. The studio audience, previously tense and uncertain, began reacting more audibly. Gasps, murmurs, and quiet exclamations rippled through the room. Every revelation from Crockett prompted flashes of phones, recordings of moments now destined to spread across the internet. Social media amplified the impact exponentially. Clips of her calm, commanding dismantling of lies went viral within minutes, trending worldwide. Memes, hashtags, and reactions created a collective narrative of validation and awe. Here was a force of reason holding chaos accountable, a demonstration of intellect overpowering intimidation. Crockett allowed herself a subtle pause, letting her final points resonate, giving viewers the space to witness the culmination of her strategy. The room seemed frozen in anticipation, the tension electric. Every eye on screen, every mind tracking her logic, understood the magnitude of the moment. Joan's face reflected the recognition of defeat, subtle but undeniable, the empire of spectacle he had cultivated for years faltering under the weight of evidence and principle. And then, in the final moments of her methodical dismantling, Crockett delivered her closing line, a statement so precise, so undeniable, that it punctured the air like a bell toll. The villain faltered, the audience gasped, and the nation watched, suspended, the drama of truth and deception unfolding before them. By the end of this moment, nobody could look away. The magnitude of what had just occurred was impossible to ignore, and as the studio lights dimmed slightly and cameras lingered on the stunned figures in the room, it was clear, the confrontation had altered the narrative irrevocably. The aftermath would send shockwaves across the internet. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, the internet erupted. Social media feeds became a battleground of awe, disbelief, and validation. Hashtags referencing Crockett's precision and Joan's unraveling trended worldwide, climbing faster than any viral video the platform had seen in months. Clips of her calm, methodical takedown were shared and reshared, accumulating millions of views before the sun even set. Memes proliferated, turning Joan's frantic interruptions into symbols of hubris, while Crockett's composed demeanor became a shorthand for reason and resilience. Across platforms, people debated, celebrated, and marveled at the unfolding spectacle, their reactions creating a collective heartbeat that mirrored the nation's fascination. Analysts weighed in immediately. Political commentators dissected the debate frame by frame, highlighting the evidence Crockett had presented and cataloging the contradictions Jones could no longer defend. Late-night hosts replayed moments of his faltering, juxtaposed against her calm authority, transforming the confrontation into a cultural touchstone. Celebrities added their voices, sharing clips, commenting on her composure, praising the courage it took to confront misinformation head-on. Even politicians, some long silent, felt compelled to address the spectacle, framing it as a pivotal moment for accountability in media and public discourse. The ripple effects were undeniable. Millions of viewers were suddenly confronting the reality of unchecked falsehoods and the power of meticulous truth-telling. The fallout extended far beyond entertainment. Public trust in media, already fragile, shifted as viewers recognized the impact of deliberate misinformation on real-world outcomes. Discussions erupted in forums, classrooms, and workplaces, centering on the responsibility of voices with influence and the dangers of unchecked narratives. The confrontation sparked debates about ethics, civic duty, and the power of evidence versus theatrics. Each conversation reinforced the significance of Crockett's performance. It wasn't merely a spectacle, it was a lesson in accountability, a reminder that authority must be earned, not performed. Meanwhile, Jones' reputation suffered visibly. Clips of his faltering expressions, frantic gestures, and failed interruptions circulated widely, often paired with commentary emphasizing the contrast between arrogance and integrity. His credibility, once reinforced by loyal followers, now faced scrutiny from broader audiences. The social media ecosystem amplified the consequences, turning what had been a live debate into a historical moment of public reckoning. People who had once consumed his content unquestioningly now paused, reconsidering the narratives they had accepted, witnessing firsthand the collapse of a carefully constructed empire built on spectacle over substance. Audiences experienced a complex blend of emotions: awe at Crockett's composure, schadenfreude at Jones' unraveling, validation for those who had long sought truth in the face of misinformation. The spectacle was cathartic, a shared moment of moral clarity that resonated across political, social, and cultural divides. The drama of the confrontation became a mirror, reflecting the consequences of unchecked power and the strength of principled resistance. The momentum of the broadcast carried into the following days. Trending topics dominated headlines, discussion panels invited experts to weigh in, and viral clips became reference points for debates on accountability, ethics, and integrity. The confrontation had sparked a chain reaction. Public dialogue shifted, expectations for media responsibility intensified, and the collective consciousness was reminded that truth, methodically presented, could dismantle even the loudest facade. But beyond the chaos, a deeper lesson emerged. In the quiet aftermath, the impact of the confrontation crystallized into something far larger than a single broadcast. Jasmine Crockett's victory was not just a personal triumph, it was a demonstration of a universal truth: diligence, honesty, and courage will always outlast bluster, deception, and spectacle. Her calm precision, her unwavering adherence to fact over fear, had not only dismantled a legend of chaos but had reminded millions of viewers that integrity matters, that public accountability is not optional, and that standing firm in the truth can reshape narratives that once seemed untouchable. Across the nation, people reflected on the meaning of what they had witnessed. For some, it was validation, a confirmation that critical thinking, preparation, and moral clarity were not just ideals, but weapons against misinformation. For others, it was inspiration, a call to stand up, to speak out, and to confront falsehoods wherever they appeared. Crockett's example became a mirror, showing that ordinary individuals, armed with knowledge and courage, could challenge even the loudest voices of deceit. The spectacle of the broadcast had faded, but its lesson reverberated, echoing through living rooms, classrooms, and online communities alike. The cinematic crescendo of the moment, the slow-motion capture of her calm gaze, the subtle nods of the audience, the collective gasp as truths were laid bare, was more than visual drama. It was a metaphor for empowerment. Where Jones had relied on fear and intimidation, Crockett relied on preparation and principle. Where he sought to dominate through noise, she commanded attention through reason. The imagery of her standing tall, composed yet unyielding, became emblematic of resilience, a beacon for anyone navigating the fog of deception, a reminder that courage and integrity shine brightest under pressure. Her example extended beyond politics and media. It was a lesson in identity and pride, a reaffirmation that the voices of those often marginalized or overlooked have power when wielded with clarity and conviction. Immigrant communities, activists, students, and ordinary citizens saw themselves reflected in her steadfastness. The confrontation transcended partisanship, it became a cultural touchstone that celebrated truth, diligence, and moral courage. The emotional resonance was palpable, an affirmation that the arc of justice can bend toward clarity, that reason can prevail, and that no facade, however loud, is impenetrable when faced with methodical truth. Crockett's victory was not just measured in headlines or social media metrics, it was measured in the ripple effects of awareness and empowerment. People shared the clips, discussed the evidence, and reflected on the stakes of misinformation in their own lives. The broadcast became a rallying point, a symbol that diligence and courage matter, that preparation and principle can shift not just a debate, but public consciousness. In every conversation sparked by her performance, viewers found a sense of validation and purpose, recognizing that their own voices, too, could contribute to a culture of accountability and truth. And in that reflection, the moral of the confrontation became undeniable: chaos can roar, deception can dominate for a time, but integrity, courage, and the relentless pursuit of truth leave a lasting imprint. Crockett had turned conflict into a lesson, spectacle into clarity, and confrontation into inspiration. The hero's composure had not only silenced falsehood but had illuminated a path forward for anyone willing to stand by fact and principle. And this is why we cannot look away. The broadcast may have ended, but the impact lingered. Alex Jones' unraveling and Jasmine Crockett's unyielding composure were not just moments in time, they were a lesson in the power of truth, courage, and accountability. For millions watching, it was a reminder that lies, no matter how loud, cannot withstand the weight of evidence and integrity. It was proof that one person, armed with preparation, principle, and unwavering moral clarity, can confront deception and inspire a nation to pay attention. This is more than a story about a debate, it's a call to action. Every like, share, and comment keeps these truths alive, amplifies the message, and holds those who spread misinformation accountable. Subscribing ensures you stay connected to moments that matter, moments where courage and diligence triumph over chaos and spectacle. By engaging, you're not just a viewer, you become part of a movement for accountability, a community that values clarity over confusion, principle over performance. So don't let this moment fade. Watch, share, and discuss it with friends, family, and colleagues. Let Crockett's example inspire you to question, to analyze, and to stand firm in the face of falsehoods. Be part of a culture that celebrates truth, that rewards preparation, and that honors those who confront lies with courage and composure. The lesson is clear: even in a world dominated by noise, integrity matters, and accountability wins. Stand tall. Speak up. Demand truth. And remember the moment when calm, reasoned courage silenced chaos, because that is the kind of power we all can embrace. In the quiet aftermath, the impact of the confrontation crystallized into something far larger than a single broadcast. Jasmine Crockett's victory was not just a personal triumph, it was a demonstration of a universal truth: diligence, honesty, and courage will always outlast bluster, deception, and spectacle. Her calm precision, her unwavering adherence to fact over fear, had not only dismantled a legend of chaos but had reminded millions of viewers that integrity matters, that public accountability is not optional, and that standing firm in the truth can reshape narratives that once seemed untouchable. Across the nation, people reflected on the meaning of what they had witnessed. For some, it was validation, a confirmation that critical thinking, preparation, and moral clarity were not just ideals, but weapons against misinformation. For others, it was inspiration, a call to stand up, to speak out, and to confront falsehoods wherever they appeared. Crockett's example became a mirror, showing that ordinary individuals, armed with knowledge and courage, could challenge even the loudest voices of deceit. The spectacle of the broadcast had faded, but its lesson reverberated, echoing through living rooms, classrooms, and online communities alike. The cinematic crescendo of the moment. The slow-motion capture of her calm gaze, the subtle nods of the audience, the collective gasp as truths were laid bare, was more than visual drama. It was a metaphor for empowerment. Where Jones had relied on fear and intimidation, Crockett relied on preparation and principle. Where he sought to dominate through noise, she commanded attention through reason. The imagery of her standing tall, composed yet unyielding, became emblematic of resilience, a beacon for anyone navigating the fog of deception, a reminder that courage and integrity shine brightest under pressure. Her example extended beyond politics and media. It was a lesson in identity and pride, a reaffirmation that the voices of those often marginalized or overlooked have power when wielded with clarity and conviction. Immigrant communities, activists, students, and ordinary citizens saw themselves reflected in her steadfastness. The confrontation transcended partisanship, it became a cultural touchstone that celebrated truth, diligence, and moral courage. The emotional resonance was palpable, an affirmation that the arc of justice can bend toward clarity, that reason can prevail, and that no facade, however loud, is impenetrable when faced with methodical truth. Crockett's victory was not just measured in headlines or social media metrics, it was measured in the ripple effects of awareness and empowerment. People shared the clips, discussed the evidence, and reflected on the stakes of misinformation in their own lives. The broadcast became a rallying point, a symbol that diligence and courage matter, that preparation and principle can shift not just a debate, but public consciousness. In every conversation sparked by her performance, viewers found a sense of validation and purpose, recognizing that their own voices, too, could contribute to a culture of accountability and truth. And in that reflection, the moral of the confrontation became undeniable: chaos can roar, deception can dominate for a time, but integrity, courage, and the relentless pursuit of truth leave a lasting imprint. Crockett had turned conflict into a lesson, spectacle into clarity, and confrontation into inspiration. The hero's composure had not only silenced falsehood but had illuminated a path forward for anyone willing to stand by fact and principle. And this is why we cannot look away.